Hello, this lesson is working with revenue accounts in UAN. We are in Chapter 2 and the section on revenue accounts, which starts on page 17 in the new client handbook. And as you can see, the menu path is under Accounting, Maintenance, Revenue Accounts. I'll read part of the overview. A revenue account is a detailed line item within a fund used to budget revenue that is to be received in the current year. The revenue accounts are defined by fund, revenue code, and the optional cost center, as we just discussed in the last lesson. The available revenue codes vary by entity type and the fund type as defined by the UAN chart of accounts. So remember our chart of accounts, which I have open already here. We're working with the township chart of accounts in our case. So we've already set up our funds, and then for those converting, you would set up your or map out and your revenue account codes in the from the chart of accounts, and so they're all listed here. So again, we're following the Uniform Accounting Network chart of accounts, and that's where the software is getting that information. Now back to our PowerPoint. Basically what it's going to look like here, you have a fund, a revenue code, and a cost center. For many account codes, the default is going to be 0 for the cost center, which is optional. So you'll have a fund and a revenue code. These two are required. So this section is a discussion on how to add those revenue codes to your personal. What you're doing here is creating your entity's entity-specific chart of accounts. A chart of accounts for your entity. You're going to pick from the information you have in the general chart of accounts that's available in what we call the UAN Township Chart of Accounts. So here are a few highlights. You can add several revenue codes in a single step. You can remove accounts with no activity. If there's no activity associated with those accounts in the current year, they can be removed. If there is activity in the current year, in other words, you've entered a budget amount for a revenue account code, well, then you can't remove it until the subsequent year, until you roll into the new year. But you could potentially deactivate or activate account codes. So you can deactivate or hide a revenue account code that was used earlier in the year, but you do not intend to use the rest of the year. Activating and deactivating will be discussed in the next lesson under appropriation maintenance. So first, guided exercise, we're going to add a few revenue account codes for the Hayes Bequest Fund. So I'll go to our software. It's located under Accounting, Maintenance, Revenue Maintenance, or Revenue Accounts, alphabetically. Find it there. And as you can see, we've already got a number of account codes added to our list of revenue accounts. These are just a sample list, so we're not starting from scratch. Again, for those of you converting, you would have a blank screen here. You would have to start adding new revenue account codes. But we're starting with a sample already in place, and so we're just going to add one. Excuse me, to keep it simple here. So you click on the Add button to add anything new to your list, and the first thing you have to do is select the fund. In our example on page 18, the fund number is 4952, and that's the Hayes Bequest Fund. And below that list, it lists all of your revenue account codes that you have not already added to this fund. Well, we move this over and look at our list. We got 4951, but no 4952 revenue account codes on our list. So this is brand new for this fund, and based on page 18, we're going to scroll down the list here to revenue account code 701. So you would, look at your list of chart of accounts again here and determine, okay, which revenue accounts do I need to include for this particular fund. So once you determine that, you would come to this add revenue account, and so you can select, like I said, multiple accounts within the same fund. So go to 701, and then we want 801 gifts and donations. So I click on that checkbox, and 820 contributions to permanent fund. And those are the only revenue accounts I want to add to this fund. Now, one thing I did skip over was cost center. Well, we're not using cost center at our cost centers at our Buckeye Township, so we'll just leave the default, which is 0, meaning there's no cost centers applied to this account. And we click on Save. And we can see on our list below, since we have a short list, we can see that it was added to the list. There's the 4952 accounts codes that we just added. If we wanted to, we could go back through our list and add some other account codes or switch to a different fund. But in our case, we'll just close this form. And then in exercise number 2, we're going to remove some account codes. So this could be, again, if you're an entity that has existing data, you may have some account codes, maybe some funds that you used last year but that they'll no longer apply to this current year, or maybe specific account codes that you'll never get that source of revenue again from. The fund may still be something that you use, but you won't get that source of revenue any longer. So as long as you don't have any activity in the current year, meaning even budgetary activity, if you set a budget for these accounts, well, then you won't be able to remove them. But for instance, we have, in our example, we have these 4301 accounts, 701 and 538. And if you remember our Buckeye Township story on page, the beginning, the first chapter, end of chapter 1, we said we had a sewer project that ended last year. And we actually just have one payment to make on that sewer project, so that'll be something we can get to in payments. But we're no longer going to be receiving any revenue or interest posted for this fund any longer. And so we can close those. We no longer need those account codes for the current year, so we can remove them. And we've had no activity this year, so we'll go ahead and select those account codes and remove them. And it's as simple as that. Now notice from your status menu, you have a few different options. We'll get to the active and inactive in a moment. Right now all of them are active. You also show the removable account codes. So notice that shortens my list. Well, I just added these 4952 accounts, and they've had no activity, so I could remove these as well if I wanted to. But there are a few of them that are active but not removable because I've done some work here before class, and there's some activity associated with it. So that's adding and removing account codes. Again, we have the activate and deactivate. We'll talk about those in the next section, next lesson. Remove, and then the only other one is display. So you could select all, display, and look through your list of account codes. That not very much application here, but if you have a very long list, then that might be something that you might choose to do. All right, if you're missing an account code, for instance, you go here to add an account code and you find it's not on your list, well, that might be because you've already added that account code. Now, this is very obvious on ours, but if you look at, I'm looking for revenue number, account code number 101, it's on my chart of accounts if I look in the appendix, but yet it doesn't show up, so property, real estate, yet it doesn't show up for the general fund. Well, it's actually listed right here in my revenue chart of accounts. So anything that you're adding new for a particular fund is not going to be displayed here. You can't add, in other words, you can't add it twice to your customized chart of accounts for your entity. You can add it once. Once it's added, it'll show up on your list of account codes, whether it's active or inactive, or if you select all, it'll show all of your account codes. All right, so that's it for revenue accounts, how to add them, and the next section is on adding appropriation accounts.